When it comes to Turo, I get questions all the time of what if fill in the blank. What if your car is stolen? What if your car is in an accident? What happens if X, Y, and Z? And so today I want to break down some of the worst case scenarios of things that could actually happen to your Turo fleet and to your vehicle. And I want to talk about what happens in these different scenarios and how you can mitigate the risk associated with these events occurring. So let's get started. Now, before we begin, I do want to remind you guys, I have a course called the Car Sharing Masterclass that teaches you how to start and scale a car sharing fleet with the exact same business model that I've used to grow my own 27 car fleet. In the course, we teach you everything you need to know from how to buy cars, how to determine which cars are the best ones to buy. I teach you how to communicate with your guests, streamline your operations, and of course, how to navigate issues when they do occur. When you sign up for the course, not only do you gain instant access to the course content, but you'll also be invited to our private Discord group as well as our monthly Zoom calls. To check out the course and learn more, you can click down in the description below. If your car is in an accident, there are a number of different scenarios that could play out, and ultimately the scenario that will play out in your case will depend on the type of accident that occurred, as well as your deductible and protection package that you have with Turo. For the sake of this video, let's say that you had proper photos, you follow the terms of service, and Turo has decided that they will cover that claim. Let's also assume that the value of the damage has exceeded your deductible, so you will get some sort of payout from Turo. The first thing that will happen is you'll need to file a claim through Turo, and then within 24 to 48 hours after that, a Turo claims rep will reach out to you to tell you the next steps of your claim. Typically, this involves one of two parties, either Snapsheet or IAA. If the damage is not a total loss, which means that the car can be repaired for a reasonable amount in relation to the value of that car, Snapsheet will be the company to step in. And they'll look at the photos, they'll determine how much the value of the damage is, and they will end up paying you out for that value. This way you can take that money and you can go get the car repaired. Now, Snapsheet has historically given low-ball offers for damage done to a vehicle. And typically, if you take a Snapsheet offer, you're not going to be able to take that amount in and of itself and fix that car with OEM original parts for the same amount that they paid you for. In most cases, if you want to use OEM original manufacturer parts on a vehicle for a repair, you will have to take your car to a shop and you will have to file a supplement. But in some cases, it does make sense to take the Snapsheet offer that Turo and Snapsheet give you to take that money by secondhand or third-party parts and use that money to fix your car on a budget, and then you can pocket the difference and potentially make a profit. Now, Snapsheet has quite the reputation of low-balling an estimate for how much it's actually going to cost to get your car fixed. And if you're somebody who wants to get your car fixed back to its original form with OEM parts, you are most likely going to have to take your car into a shop, and then the shop is going to have to file a supplement to get more money from Turo and Snapsheet. An alternative could be that you simply buy secondhand or third-party parts, you get the car fixed for the amount that Snapsheet quoted, and sometimes you can have a little bit of profit left over. The type of approach that you take with your car will depend on the type of car, the damage, as well as your experience in fixing cars. But both one of these routes are very valid and legitimate options. If you end up fixing your car, you'll simply have to get your car repaired, whether you do that at a shop or do it yourself. You'll most likely have to get your car inspected and do a maintenance inspection form that Turo will provide, and you'll also have to provide proof that your car has in fact been repaired. Once you provide this proof, your car will be relisted and you'll be good to move on. On the flip side though, if your car is totaled, you'll have IAA step in rather than Snapsheet. And at this point, IAA will look at the photos. They may occasionally send an adjuster out to your location to look at the car in person, at which point they'll determine whether or not that car is a total loss. Now, if your car is a total loss, Turo will pay you actual cash value for your vehicle. Actual cash value is determined by a database, and unfortunately, unless Turo just simply gets the make, model, year, trim of your vehicle completely wrong, in my experience, there is very little wiggle room in negotiating on the actual cash value that Turo and IAA determine for your vehicle. But historically, I've also been extremely happy with ACVs that Turo has given me for my own vehicles. And if you buy a car for a below market value price, oftentimes the ACV is actually more than you ended up paying for the car originally, which is a win all the way around. If Turo and IAA determine the car is totaled, then they'll end up sending you some paperwork. You'll have to send them the title, fill out the paperwork, and then typically the total loss claim will be settled in a matter of a couple of weeks. You'll get paid out for the ACV of the car. They will take the car, then you're able to use that money to buy a different car. If your car is financed and you don't have the title in hand, it does elongate the process. In fact, back in 2022, whenever my my Maserati Ghibli was totaled, this was a financed vehicle, and it really made this process last quite a lot longer, and it probably took 2 to 3 months to settle rather than 2 to 3 weeks. Now, I get messages all the time from people saying, hey, my car was totaled, the ACV that Turo came back with was $10,000, but I still owe $19,000 on this car. These exact values are just examples, but I get messages like this all the time. And unfortunately, if you're at the point in your Turo career where you are getting an ACV from Turo because of a total loss, it's unfortunately probably too late to fix any issues with the amount that you owe on that car versus the amount that you're going to get paid. And ultimately, this comes down to the fact that you probably purchased the car at an overinflated price, and there really isn't anything that you can do about that at that point in time. Once you get your ACV from Turo and you know how much you already owe on that loan, if those amounts don't add up and you end up being underwater on that vehicle, well, then you're going to have to figure out how to handle that on your own. Having to continue paying on that loan even after the car has been totaled, or alternatively taking out some sort of personal loan. Really, whichever way you slice it, this really isn't an ideal situation, which is why I preach so much on this channel about buying cars that are below market value. In general, a wreck on Turo isn't the end of the world, and I'm a big believer that if you're somebody who's wanting to stay on Turo long term and you want to grow a fleet, it's not a matter of if your cars are going to get totaled or wrecked, it is just a matter of when and how often. But as long as you follow the terms of service, you take good photos, and you respond to Turo with the information that they need in a timely manner, you'll be covered. And the process for the most part is pretty smooth. Now, there are a few scenarios where your car may be stolen. Now, unfortunately, the most common of these scenarios is a scenario where your car actually isn't stolen at all, and this is a circumstance where a guest has kept the car past the return time. So for example, a car is due back at 10 a.m., it is now 1 p.m. and the car hasn't been returned. Or in some extreme cases, it may even be the next day and the car still hasn't been returned. Now, for many people, you would consider this to be a stolen vehicle. In fact, I would on a personal basis, and when this happens to my cars, I do oftentimes refer it as a stolen car, but in the eyes of the law, this is technically not a stolen vehicle because you gave the keys to this person, they just simply didn't return the car in the amount of time they said they would return it in. So rather than looking at the car as a stolen vehicle, it really is somebody who's just overstayed their welcome. And truthfully, if this type of scenario happens to you where a guest has kept your car past the return time, I would encourage you to not panic. The other day, HP and I got a call from an acquaintance at 11 p.m. This is somebody who started a Turo business because they were inspired by HP and he ended up calling us freaking out about the fact that his car had not been returned and it was a couple of hours past his return time. He was extremely worried. He was having trouble going to sleep because he was so worried about what was going to happen to his car. And the advice that I gave him was the same advice that I give everyone on my channel and in my course. When it comes to stolen or unreturned cars, my philosophy is the exact same as it is whenever a car gets wrecked. Follow the terms of service and you'll be covered. So don't sweat it. After growing my fleet to 27 cars and having nearly 4,500 trips on the Turo platform, I have come across dozens and dozens of scenarios over the years where guests simply haven't returned my vehicles. And while I understand on the surface it seems like a major problem, it really isn't. And you just have to work through the Turo procedures to resolve the issue at hand. The moment that you notice a car is missing, you should file a late return with Turo. This is just to make sure that it's noted and that you have crossed your T's and dot your I's. But ultimately, whenever it comes to a late return, Turo really isn't going to do anything until it hits that 24-hour mark. If your car gets returned within 24 hours, you'll want to message Turo and let them know when the car has been returned, and you'll also want to let them know that you do want to file an improper return fee and an additional use fee. This will make sure that you get paid for the time that the guest has kept your vehicle. Once I file a late return on a guest, I will typically message that guest and ask one more time what their ETA is. I will also let them know that there is going to be additional fees applied to the rental per the Turo terms of service. Typically in these scenarios, especially if the guest is being unresponsive, I will also snooze the car to make sure that it doesn't get booked out. If the car is already booked out and it's supposed to go on another rental relatively soon, I will simply call Turo, let them know what's going on, and they'll cancel the trip at no harm to me or my metric. If I'm able to, I'll also switch the guest into a new car. Once the car is over 24 hours late, Turo will escalate it to their trust and safety department. And this trust and safety department is an extremely qualified department of Turo that is basically trained to deal with these major issues. You'll have to follow their instructions, which I believe does vary from state to state, but it will involve sending out a demand letter to the address listed on the license to the guest. You will have to follow their instructions and they will ask you a series of questions like, do you have a tracker on your car? Did you check their license? Did the guest let you know where they were going? And while the exact steps I do believe vary from state to state, you will most likely have to send a demand letter to the guest letting them know that they're in violation of the rental agreement. From there, you'll have to wait a set period of time before you can actually report this car as properly stolen. But truthfully, most cars get recovered before it ends up getting to that point. If you have trackers like I do, you can also do a self-repossession where you actually go and get the car, and you can also get paid for your time through Turo as well. Or alternatively, you can also have Turo call a tow truck to tow the car back to you, which is my preferred method. Not only is this method more convenient, but it's also safer as well. We have had so many instances over the years of cars not being returned, guests keeping the cars way longer than they needed to, and once we got trackers, we were really able to mitigate how long guests kept cars past their return time. Trackers have been a huge investment in this regard, and with the trackers, you're able to get the car back much faster. In fact, over the years, with or without trackers, we've never run into an instance where a car hasn't been able to be recovered. More often than not, the guests will return it themselves, and in some extreme cases, they'll let us know where the car is, in which case we can pick it up. Now, HP and I did recently run into an issue with a guest where he actually did steal one of our cars. You see, just this past week, we had a guest who did a last-minute booking on one of our vehicles. At the point of booking, we told him everything we needed from him, including his license photos, and he ignored that message. Whenever he got to our parking lot, he expected entry into the vehicle, at which point we told him that we couldn't give him access until he sent us the license photos. And it was then that he let us know that he actually didn't have his license on him. He begged us to give him access to the car, in which point we repeatedly told him that we couldn't do that, and it was against the Turo terms of service. Eventually, his messages just completely stopped, and he started ignoring them and ignoring our phone calls. Within a few minutes, we looked at our trackers and noticed that the car was driving, which meant that this guest had stolen that car. We called Turo, and they told us to get local law enforcement involved, which we did, and within about an hour, this guest was stopped a couple of towns over. We were able to get our car recovered, and this guest was unfortunately arrested. This was an unfortunate situation all the way around, and it certainly was one of the more extreme instances of a stolen vehicle in my entire career. But even though this was one of the more extreme circumstances, it still wasn't the end of the world, and everything ended up working out fine. Again, my motto with Turo is follow the terms of service and you'll be covered. You can't sweat it. Now, the worst case scenario that any car sharing host or any driver could potentially run into is somebody being killed in your car or by the driver of your vehicle. Now, fortunately, I have never run into this issue, and I hope that I never ever have to deal with it, but unfortunately it is the reality of renting out cars, and there are Turo hosts that have had to deal with this. Now, I know somebody personally who did give me permission to talk about this on my channel, but I'm not going to be talking about markets, cars, or names. But long story short, a guest was driving his car and he ended up killing somebody in the vehicle. The family of the person who was killed understandably tried to sue whoever they could, and it's my understanding that they sued not only the insurance company, but Turo, the driver, as well as the owner of the vehicle, so the person that I know. It ended up being a really long, drawn-out court case, like most court cases are, but in this instance, Turo foot the bill for all of the lawyers and court fees, and they were also the ones who paid the settlement as well. And while this absolutely took a pretty massive mental toll on the host that was affected, they ultimately didn't have to pay anything towards the court's, lawyers' fees, or settlement, which is a big win. Now, when it comes to the liability of if someone kills somebody in your vehicle or if somebody dies in your vehicle, there is something called the Graves Amendment. The Graves Amendment is part of a federal highway bill signed into law in 2005 that bars vicarious liability claims against car rental companies for injuries caused by their customers, unless it can be proven that the company's negligence or actions contributed to those injuries. Now, to my knowledge, this hasn't been tested in the world of car sharing, at least not on a main stage like a federal court. So it's unclear if the Graves Amendment will hold up in an instance where a car sharing host has somebody driving their car and they kill somebody in that vehicle. But there is no doubt a valid argument that the Graves Amendment could certainly apply. So not only do you have the ability to have Turo support through a court proceeding, assuming you follow the terms of service, but you also have the ability to fall back on that Graves Amendment as well. Now, obviously, this type of scenario is horrific, and it's something that I do not wish on anyone ever. And if there was a scenario where you would lose sleep, this would certainly be the one. But I do think it's comforting to know that as long as you follow the terms of service, Turo will be there to help you navigate it. And there have been instances of this exact same thing playing out, and Turo helped out quite a lot through the process. So the theme of this video is that as long as you follow the terms of service, as long as you take your photos and you're making sure that you are crossing your T's and dotting your I's as a Turo host, you will be covered in most, if not all, major situations. This is why I am such a big preacher of following the terms of service, because every single worst case scenario that could play out ultimately can be mitigated, if not eliminated, by simply following the terms of service. If you have not read the terms of service, you absolutely should before you continue renting your car on Turo. It is a must-do for any car sharing host who is wanting to rent on Turo, who's currently renting on Turo, and I encourage you to stay up to date with the terms of service as well, because it does occasionally change. Like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.